SUVs with space for the whole family are somewhat of a staple here in Australia. A quick look back at the history of the segment brings me to things like the Ford Territory, the Holden Captiva, although we don't really talk about that one, and of course, how can you forget the big old Toyota Kluger. Chasing cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by Now in its fourth generation, this Toyota Kluger has more than established itself in Australia, and especially with a hybrid powertrain that seemingly laughs in the face of rising fuel costs. And speaking of, over the last 12 months, 67% of all Kluger sales have been for hybrid variants, which is nothing to sneeze at. So with seating for the whole family, a fuel economy figure that betters that of some small SUVs, and a very impressive price tag, is this Toyota Kluger GXL Hybrid the best large SUV that you can buy in Australia? Before we dive into this review of the Kluger GXL Hybrid, it's worth noting that this is a model year 22 car, and there are a few slight differences for the model year 23, mainly being an updated 12.3-inch dash display with wireless phone projection. Toyota also isn't providing pricing for these new SUVs, citing supply delays, and they state that contacting a dealer is the best way to get this information. Though the exterior of the Kluger isn't the most eye-catching, it's fair to say that the interior feels very premium and is really quite upmarket. Up here, you've got an 8-inch infotainment screen with satellite navigation, and although it doesn't get wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, it does get those two systems included, but you're going to need to plug your phone in. And then behind the steering wheel here, you get a semi-digital cluster. And what I mean by that is you've got a pair of analog gauges either side of a 7-inch screen. And I mean, it's nice to use. It kind of shows that you don't need one of these fancy all-digital clusters because the information's there and I like it. On that premium topic, there are a plethora of soft touch materials that surround you when you're sitting right here. Obviously on the door cards, on the dash, it's all leather covered. You also get a really nice leather wrapped steering wheel that just feels nice to grab. There's also this kind of strange plasticky grey trimming that contrasts the leather, but it's rather inoffensive and looks nice. Then you've got the seats. They're big, they kind of feel like a lazy boy, which means that they're very comfortable for long trips. They've got 8-way power adjustment and they're also heated, which is a nice bonus. But unfortunately, they miss out on ventilation. And as I've found over the last 3 months, that's something that's quite important in the Australian summer. Other amenities that you'll find in the cabin include a basic 6-speaker sound system that is actually reasonably impressive to listen to. There's also a pair of USBs down here, a 12-volt socket and another USB, which I can only assume is for charging, a pair of cup holders, but if I'm honest, space is the one thing that this Kluger has plenty of. There's massive door bins. I mean, I feel like I'm not constricted at all here. There's so much space. And then in the middle here, it's kind of reminiscent of one of those big American SUVs with a very wide center console. That also means that you get a massive bin here with a little shelf up here to put your little items, and then just a massive bin down there for anything. Big water bottles, food, pizzas, whatever you want. Back here in the second row of the Kluger, the theme of a massive amount of space continues because I feel like I'm in an aeroplane right now, if I'm honest. You've got a massive amount of headroom, there's a heap of legroom, and I'd say one of the highlights that's very underrated of this Kluger is a very flat floor. It does get a bit of a raised transmission tunnel here, but it's quite interesting because for an all-wheel drive vehicle, it's so unintrusive into the cabin and it's fantastic. Unfortunately, the premium feeling isn't the same and doesn't really continue back here. I mean, you get the same synthetic leather seat, but the door cards, scratchy plastic. There is leather armrests, but I don't know, it's just a little bit of a disappointment when they're made to look like the leather up front, but they're just cheap plastic. On the amenities front, the Kluger GXL comes standard with tri-zone climate control, which means back here you get temperature and fan control, as well as roof-mounted vents, which work out great when the roof is so high. There's a couple of USB ports back here, and although there's no panoramic sunroof on this model, you're going to have to upgrade to that Grande hybrid if you want to be able to see out the roof. And lastly, these seats actually have a very handy function in the fact that they both tilt and slide, meaning A, getting into that third row is easier, and B, once you've got a somewhat tall person in the back there, you can actually slide these seats forward to give them a bit of extra legroom. So let's go check out that row. As you'd expect, back here in the third row, space doesn't come easily. And that's mainly because there's quite a raised floor, so your knees are quite high. And if I had the seat back in its original position where it slid right back, I probably wouldn't be able to fit here. Thankfully, as I mentioned, you can slide these seats forward, so now I have got a decent amount of leg room. And up there, I could probably sit as well, so it's actually quite good. In terms of headroom, you wouldn't want to be much taller than me because I'm probably about a centimetre off the roof, so if I grew any more in the next few minutes, it'd be quite uncomfortable. On the amenities front, it's actually quite generous though. You get a pair of cup holders on each side, which is quite interesting considering there's only 2 seats back here, but you can have a total of 4 drinks. And you also get those same roof-mounted air vents, so even though you might get claustrophobic back here, you won't die of heat exhaustion. An electric tailgate comes standard at the back of this Kluger GXL Hybrid, and when that opens, you'll get access to 241 litres of space with both rows of seating in place. This jumps to 552 with that third row folded, and when you've got both rows of seats folded, you'll have access to 1,150 litres of space. And there's no denying that it's an enormous amount of space back here, even with just that third row folded. Other things to note back here include the 2-ton towing capacity that the Kluger gets when it's fitted with a tow bar, and then also you'll find a full-size spare wheel up under the bonnet of the car beneath the boot. As for what it costs to keep this Kluger Hybrid on the road, Toyota claims a combined fuel economy of 5.6 litres per 100 kilometres. During independent testing, we found that on the highway it would sit in the low 5s region, and then in urban scenarios it would jump up to the high 5s, but we still didn't see 6 litres per 100 kilometres. So impressive, and I'd say that Toyota's figure is accurate. In saying that, it's also worth noting that these hybrids here require 95 octane to run, whereas the V6 petrols only need 91. As far as servicing goes, this Kluger GXL Hybrid right here will cost $1,325 to service over 5 years, and intervals are every 12 months or 15,000 kilometres. And like all Toyota products in Australia, it's covered by their 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty. Over the last 12 months, the median budget direct customer paid $1,246 to comprehensively insure their new Toyota Kluger. Your premium may vary based on things that insurers take into account, such as your age, driving history, where you live, and whether or not you garage the car. So like that smaller RAV4 hybrid, this Toyota Kluger Hybrid gets a 2.5 litre petrol engine underneath their bonnet. Now it produces 142 kilowatts and 242 newton meters of torque, but then you've got the hybrid element, and this system chips in with an extra 42 kilowatts, bringing peak power up to 184 kilowatts. Now this is sent to all 4 wheels via an eCVT transmission, and I've got to say, it's quite nice to use. Now, by modern standards, and especially large SUV standards, when you've got crazy things like BMW X5Ms and GLE 63s with ridiculous power figures, these numbers don't seem big. But if I'm honest, I've been pleasantly surprised by the amount of grunt that's offered in this SUV. Driving along, I mean, in normal traffic, you won't really notice anything particularly powerful, but I find either pulling off from the lights or when you have to make a passing maneuver at around 100 kilometers an hour, there is a decent amount of grunt on offer. And that's not only by the it's a reasonably large engine up front, let's be real. 2.5 litres in the modern times is, dare I say, nearing on big block territory, but you've also got that hybrid system, and that kicks in with a hefty amount of torque as well. So, I mean, it's a fun car to drive. This surprising performance is especially pleasant when you consider that the Kluger is rather porky. As far as the ride goes, it's really nice actually. It's a nice kind of lumbering ride. I mean, I wouldn't say it's athletic by any means, but you wouldn't want that in a 7-seat SUV. It's just, it kind of wafts over the road. Over rough surfaces it can get a little fidgety, but I mean, that's just something you're gonna have to expect from a car with fixed dampers. But in saying that, you've got to give credit to the large amount of sidewall that these wheels get. I mean, there's a heap of rubber on this car, and that means that rough roads are the bumps are minimized, and as well as a nice ride, all that rubber underneath this Kluger contributes to the hefty amount of grip that it gets. I mean, firstly, you'll notice off the line, wheel slip is almost non-existent, something that is rather evident in the front wheel drive V6 variants, but also through the corners. I mean, understeer, you will get there, but under normal driving conditions, even in the wet, I haven't found it. When you do start pushing on in the corners, you will find that it does have the tendency to body roll a bit, but I mean, that's just symptomatic from any rather porky SUV that has quite a high centre of gravity, so I'm not going to deduct points for that because it's just something you'd expect. The transmission is also something that's worth talking about because while CVTs are often palmed off as uninspiring and a bit boring to use, Toyota's eCVT is an anomaly in that regard, because I mean, while it doesn't actually shift gears like a traditional automatic gearbox, it feels solid, it doesn't rev to the moon when you put your foot down, and I mean, I haven't found any issue with it. And finally, for a big family-friendly SUV, probably the main aspect of it is its safety, and the Kluger has plenty of that. First of all, it got a 5-star ANCAP rating just in 2021, and that's a rating that isn't going to expire until 2027. And then on top of being just a large presence on the road, which kind of gives you a sense of safety in itself, it also comes jam-packed with all of Toyota's active advanced safety systems, including things like adaptive cruise control, blind spot monitoring, lane keep assist, and they're all standard. So as well as making this an easier car to commute in and live with, you've also got peace of mind that it will keep you and your family safe on trips around this big country. As a whole, this Toyota Kluger GXL Hybrid is a very impressive vehicle with room for the whole family, a thoroughly impressive fuel economy, and best of all, a price that shouldn't break the bank. At around $67,000 before on-road costs, I'd say that this GXL right here is a sweet spot of the Kluger Hybrid range, considering that it gets quite a few premium aspects, including that large screen, and it costs around $13,000 less than that range-topping Kluger Grande. But those are just my thoughts on the Kluger GXL Hybrid. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.